Good day to you, my fellow endoskeletons. I'm Kenetor, and welcome to my Starbase 2021 year in review. This year was certainly one I didn't expect from Starbase, and it was a year of two halves, one of the end of closed alpha, and one of the launch of the game into early access. In my review of last year, I had a few wishes for the game to be successful. One was to put group play and company play first, making sure players could effectively play as a group rather than a collection of solo players. And I expected a big part of that group play to be centered around stations too, given how many different segments Origin Station had, with different features like refueling, ship design areas, and generally a way to have a home away from Origin. So what did we get? Well, earlier in the year, Closed Alpha continued to make a lot of progress with many improvements, including but not limited to a new asteroid belt, respawn mechanics, transponders, 3D printers, center of mass and thrust indicators for the ship designer, plasma thrusters, moon atmospheres, and new switches and buttons were also added. Power and thrust mechanics were also tweaked and balanced, and bug fixes were a weekly feature. We were also first introduced, at least out of game, to a little feature called Easy Build Mode. This feature would be an alternative way to build ships for those that didn't want to dive into the depth and difficulty of the ship designer. It had a blueprint planning mode to lay out your build before you make any parts or weld anything in place. It looked like it would be a very useful feature for new players and casual ones alike, something more akin to the box-based building games that some might be used to. But for some reason, it never appeared in Closed Alpha and didn't receive any player testing at all. And while the details were few, we were introduced to capital ships and Station Siege just before the game launch. These turned out to be quite deceptive in nature, both in how far along the features were, but the features they involved. But more on that in a bit. Well, launch came and went, and as to be expected, bringing bugs galore. And to the devs' credit, we saw numerous bug fixes very quickly. Alas, the game was hugely different from what we saw being tested in Closed Alpha, and not in a good way either. And this meant a further mountain of bugs, some of which took months to fix. Firstly, everything in the market was gone. The entire building reduced to a pointless waste of space except for the cosmetic armor shop. But why? Where were we supposed to get our parts from? Well, that's where the brand new crafting features came in. Not factories, but crafting from a set of different benches. And said crafting was limited by a brand new research tree. The crafting benches to me seem a bit of a stand-in for a full feature set. They are non-interactive and are not animated in any way. They just enable crafting by proximity. Not entirely exciting. And while we knew things like a tech tree and crafting was coming, it was at this point the player base was kind of taken aback by such sweeping changes to the game. Some we knew were coming, but not the form they would take. Instead of just resource gating parts, we were given 3 huge trees and hundreds of hours of grinding ahead of us. Instead of, and I quote, "The tech tree is indeed aimed to guide the experience, so it's definitely not a grind, or a time gate." And to add insult to injury, the entire tech tree could just be bypassed, with the addition of a few credits and just making the components you wanted from the ship designer. To say the community reaction of being lied to was bad is an understatement, especially since we were so used to Frozen Byte sharing so much with us each week via the progress reports and its videos. That's strike one. Players also got their hands on the new Easy Build Mode, since it was built into the tutorial, and thanks to the complete lack of testing, also turned out to be a disaster. One that to this day, 6 months post-launch, is still broken as fuck, earning the community name of Easily Bugged Mode. In fairness, many of the bugs did eventually get sorted, but the feature itself is still broken at best and completely non-functional at worst to this day. Then much to our horror, we find that Easy Build Mode is not just for ships. Oh no. The devs completely gutted player stations. Gone are the stations that matched Origin and gave the game a cohesive look. In its place we have easy build stations, reduced initially to nothing more than a tiny 108 meter build area and made from block, like any other creative space game. Well, maybe we got more features, so that's why this has happened. Maybe we got some bigger feature blocks to add in, like how the old lot designer used to work. Sadly, that's a no. We had no landing pads, no lots, just a very limited bunch of different style blocks, and a factory area with no factory parts, and a bunch of extra bugs that stopped it working anyway. Bugs that, once again, are still there. Were these changes shown in a video released just a few weeks prior to the release on Station Siege? No, it wasn't. That's strike 2. Easy build mode should have been made in the designer first, as a toggle to a simpler build system, not the mess we received on launch day. The system we have now could have come later with the help of PTU testing. Not only doing this would have meant we avoided a lot of the bugs it caused, it would have laid the groundwork to have station and a capital ship designer from the get-go, which these two features desperately need. Huge opportunity was missed here by those calling the shots over at Frozenbyte. We can't not mention the roadmap here too. The roadmap was pretty ambitious, especially with its timings. There was a heck of a lot of content there, and videos that showed off siege and capital ships made many think it was possible, while the more long-term community members figured they would be lucky if they got half of it done, especially given how unpredictable the development has been so far. Well, it turns out it was worse than that. We got about a third, and of the major features, multiplayer station building is questionable, given how tiny they are and how it's impossible to build a station and design it at the same time with multiple people. It's much more suited to solo work. Many items on the roadmap also didn't even get started due to how long some of the larger features have taken. The devs have committed to a different type of roadmap for this year, which will not only show the main features, but the dependent features too. This is a great idea and I think will help manage expectations on how big or small a certain feature is. Sadly though, I'm not confident we will see anything new for 2022, as it will probably take this year to finish last year's roadmap, while also giving the game some much needed bug fixing and quality of life updates. Last year I used the trailers as a guide for what the game is working towards, since they were the thing that got most of us interested in the game and what it will offer us in terms of gameplay. I can't do the same this year because we simply don't know the vision for Starbase anymore. Since Origin style stations have gone, there's been no massive amounts of faction warfare, and the dev factions are meaningless shells and haven't really popped up in any community news whatsoever. And this is a big problem, at least for me. I think the community needs to know where the game is headed, to both question it and decide if it's something that they are still interested in. While many players have stopped playing to wait for new content in the game, there is a sizable chunk of players that decided the game wasn't for them, at least in its current form. Some checked out immediately and got refunds, and some played for a good while and decided it was nothing like what they thought it would be. Now a lot of this shift in direction can clearly be chalked up to just standard game design evolution and development, but it's no excuse for leaving us hanging on the vision for the more long-term future. But without said future features being made, it's going to be hard to show them off in a new trailer or something. But that's Frozenbyte's problem, not mine, thankfully. There is a lot of frustrating unknowns for the year ahead, since we didn't get so much of what we were supposed to get this year, and that makes it hard, at least for me, to get excited. We have long delayed features that, while good resource sinks and new objectives, will just be burned through just as quickly as the launch content was. We will end up back at the current state before not too long, and there's still so much more to do to make this a solid game experience. That said, I 100% think Starbase has a good foundation to build on, it just needs to be done right, and further avoid scrapping entire systems like the old stations were. So while the game still hasn't got a strike 3 from me, for many others it already has. Frozenbyte needs to turn this around with better choices on game design, implementation and communication, and not repeat the same mistakes it has in the past, and maybe rethink some of the harder lines they have decided, like no NPCs for example, to drive more PvE content. Because let's face it, exploring doesn't really cut it, and neither does hundreds of hours of repetitive mining and flying. So what do we have to look forward to? Well, it's been a bit of a gloomy overview so far. The game can only get better from here. Obviously we have the very late cap ships, moon mining, moon bases and siege, for which I expect to hit probably at earliest around February or March. The devs have commented on taking a look at the broken armor mechanics, and I've mentioned a promising player solution from the forum in my progress reports before. Heat mechanics is getting a much needed rework, as for even the more seasoned ship designers the system is cumbersome and still involves a little guesswork on whether something has leaked all its coolant or you just didn't have enough in the first place. New ball turrets will probably come to the game in 2022 as well, which should bring some much more viable multi-crew ships and a whole range of new attack ships. Providing it doesn't take a year, we will also see the new gas collectors along with their management systems. Trading of ships will be a much easier thing with the ship deeds, and blueprints will also be tradable via the blueprint ships too. Inventory 2.0 is another big improvement that's needed for some of the previously mentioned big features, and this will bring extra parts to the ships in forms of both new crate types as well as crate sizes. It should improve station inventories with ore stacking too. A brand new cosmetic system should come into play next year too. We've already seen quite a lot of new armor sets over the last 2 years in the progress reports that are just waiting to be implemented into the game. Not only that, these will be custom paintable too, unlike the current pre-made sets and colours. Companies are on the verge of being usable for something too, with company ships recently being implemented, so if stations could get company storage or even company owned stations, this would help greatly. Stations will also be renameable soon as well, meaning they can be better used as waypoints for your company. Not only that, many demanded features like player station based ship designers and repair halls are also being shoehorned into the various halls. So maybe this year we can finally get that home away from Origin that we all wanted. And speaking of home territory may also be a thing, with the devs talking about how a group of stations will form a territory. And not only that, that will be marked on a global map that will come to the game at some point. With that said, I know many of you are waiting for new content, and when it does finally come, take it easy. Launch has shown us there's really no rush to get through all of this stuff as fast as possible. The universe is massive, with no rush to find and lock down any particular area of it. Not only that, over time, those newer rare resources will make their way to Origin for purchase, so everyone will eventually have plenty of access to these. So relax, enjoy the game at a reasonable pace, because we don't know when or what is coming next for now. Remember, whatever feelings you have about the game, the devs, or my opinions in this video, just remember this, and have a great year. Kenetor, out.